Hey, what's up guys, Mashine here, come back with a brand new video for you guys. Today we're going to be going over CSGO knives and what are the best knives to invest into based off what we've seen in the past year. Now for this we're going to be looking at only the vanilla finishes, but we can assume that roughly the trends are going to stay the same. Obviously if something was down 70% in its vanilla skin, it's probably not going to be up 150% anywhere else or anything crazy like that. But before we hop on into it, only a small percentage of you guys who watch the videos are actually subscribed. If you guys are looking to pick up anything knife related or even CSGO related, I've got a couple links in the description that definitely help me out. Let's hop on into it. Now for what we're doing today, we're going to be looking at the prices 1 year ago versus the prices today and comparing that in a percentage wise gain or loss. So first up here we have the survival knife. Now around a year ago it was 300 bucks, and this is one of the knives that came out with shattered web. You'll see our first couple knives here came out with shattered web, so they obviously had a little bit of an inflated price. But it's only at about $210 today, meaning it's only kept about 70% of its value. The Paracord is in a pretty similar situation, was $340, now is $240, and that's only about 70.58%. This is something we're going to see a lot with the newer knives. They're not as developed, and they're going to be a lot more susceptible to those higher and lower price falls. Next up then, we have the Nomad knife. Now the Nomad knife did a little bit better, but it's still in that group. It went from about $230, now it's only sitting at around $180, keeping just over 78% of its value. Nothing really good there. Next up then we have our first knife that's not part of shattered web. It's the classic knife. Now this one kind of makes sense because the classic knife was not included in my previous iteration of this video, which I definitely recommend you guys would check out, but it was just coming out about 8 months after my previous video, so it's only been out for around a year and 8 months total, so it's pretty obvious to see why that price is still falling a little bit. It does keep around 5/6 of its value, coming in at 86.7% of its value has been kept, which is pretty decent for one of the newer knives. Next up then we have the Ursus knife, going from $215 to $195, only keeping about 90% of its value. Falcheon is pretty similar, going from $120 to $110, only keeping around 91 and 2/3% of its value, which is still not terrible, but it's not something you're really going to be looking for if you're looking for a good knife to invest into. You want to make sure that it's at least sustaining its value, and hopefully that finish will put it up. But the vanilla knives here, a lot of them are struggling. And speaking of that, in my last video I made on this, we had a lot of the knives that were in the positive, and there was only a couple of them that were actually in the negatives. I believe only one of them or a couple of them really did super well, above that 30-40%. But here we're seeing a lot of them struggling, and we're also seeing a couple pullaways at the end that we'll get to in just a minute here. But the Talon knife did pretty decent last time, but here just couldn't pull through, going from 330 to 315, only keeping about 95% of its value. And the gut knife, pretty similar, going from around 98 bucks to 95, keeping about 97% of its value. Next up here though, we do have the turning point. Finally, I know we're getting to two knives here that actually pretty much stood even. We've got the Navaja knife, went from around $70 and it's still around that $70 range. Could be decent if you are able to get a really good finish on it. Same with the Shadow Daggers, going from $125 to $125, keeping 100% of its value. Nothing to complain about there, but it's still not that most ideal investment. Next up here then, we have our first positive knife, and that's going to be the flip knife, going from about $145 to $150. About 3.4% of a gain, which is really about inflation, so you're not going to be getting too much with this, but it's definitely good to see your knife appreciating in price. And then right after that we have our Huntsman knife. Huntsman knife slowly creeping up as well, going from $165 to $175. Not too big of a surprise here. There's not too many of these still entering the market. Most of them that are out there right now have been there for a while. This case has been pretty far gone. I mean, this case does not have too many left on the market, but 106%, so about a 6% gain is nothing to complain about. Next up here then, we got a pretty big surprise. We've got the skeleton knife, one from Shattered Web, and this went from about $850 to now it's sitting at around $920. Now this one can partially kind of be equated to that it's just such a high price point and there's still not a ton of them out there, so the liquidity of it is not the greatest. 108%, so an 8% gain is definitely really good though, but I can expect that we'll probably see this price stay even or maybe even go down a bit with that fracture case in the active drop pool. Now here we're starting to get to our big gainers. We got the Stiletto going from 150 to 170. That's a 13% profit, almost double the Huntsman there. That's a really good gain, which is surprising because the Stiletto didn't do really good in my last video, but here it's obviously doing much better. Then right after that, we got the Bowie. A little bit of surprise on my end. I didn't think the Bowie would be ranking this high, but it went from about 125 to 145, which is about a 16% profit, which is really good. Honestly, I didn't think the Bowie would be ranking this high. Now here we've got our 4 big gainers. Coming in fourth is the M9 Bayonet. M9 Bayonet went up $100, going from $385 to $485. That's about a 26% gain, which is really awesome. That's a huge margin, but it is a little bit more on the expensive side for this list, so we can see that easily happening. And the Bayonet is in a very similar situation, from 340 to 445. That's about a 31% gain. Pretty similar situation to the M9 there. It's always been around $40 behind, but here it did a little bit better percentage wise. And then we've got our runner up here, the Karambit, going from 450 to 610, $160 difference. That's huge. That's about 35.5% gain, which is absolutely crazy. And what's even more surprising is the Karambit didn't do this well last video. It still did decent, but it didn't do this well. And then finally, we've got our big kahuna. I think you guys already know who it is. It's the butterfly knife, man. This knife has been on fire. Last video, it went up around 50%, and here it went up an astounding 73.8%. That's a 73.8% gain. Absolutely crazy, going from $630 to around $1,095. That's a $465 increase. That's almost as close to double as we're going to see. And that's pretty much double the profit we saw with the Karambit. Karambit was about 35. This was 73%, almost 74%, which is absolutely crazy. But it is one of those items where we're starting to see the liquidity slow down a little bit. It's getting to that price point where it's a lot of buyers are not able to put up that amount of money to pay for a single knife. So we can see the demand pretty much going straight up for it. That is really all I have for today, guys, though. I hope you guys found this informative and will use it to help make that decision on if you're going to buy a knife for an investment purpose. Look at which of the knives did well and which of those that really struggled a bit. But as always, guys, I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.